All right, man, peace. So in this overly politicized world that we currently live in, people are far more hesitant to speak certain truths because they're worried about who they're going to offend. Well, Charles Barkley decided, as usual, that he's going to buck the trend and speak his actual mind. And he's going to make a statement that's based in reality and based in a certain level of truth. Now, we know that Charles Barkley is not going to become a member of Mensa anytime soon, but he does say things that tend to hit at a certain vein of truth within an overall narrative or storyline. What was it that Charles Barkley stated? He says that in his opinion, professional athletes should be able to jump to the front of the line in getting access to the COVID-19 vaccine because for all intents and purposes, they're considered essential workers in this society. Why is that? Because in the continuation of the professional sports world, it allows an outlet for people who are stuck in their homes and might sink into a deeper state of depression if they don't have something to occupy their minds. So that's why sports is so useful, especially in this time period. And for all intents and purposes, those of us who live in the real world, we know these things. That in addition to money, when you have a greater amount of fame, you gain access to nicer things, whether it be women, vehicles, housing, and health care. That's just a fact of the matter. But of course, the woke contingent in the media and on television are going to try to take Charles to task for the things that he said. Of course, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
Moving on to NBA legend Charles Barkley, a dude who is normally pretty beloved and respected, but Charles has himself in some hot water, Renee, and it all has to do with NBA stars and the COVID-19 vaccine.
Once again, I don't think that what Charles said was that controversial, but it's going to be taken that way because he's going against the overall company line. Right now, the mainstream media, well, I should specify the mainstream liberal media, as well as the overly politicized anchors and pundits on television, are trying to hustle the vaccine as being something that's in high demand. They're trying to make the masses of the people believe that the vaccine is in high demand because that's a marketing strategy. Come get it now before it leaves the shelves. It's hot. Nobody really believes that other than older people who might be desperate or thinking that somehow America is going to return back to what it was. On the internet, you have many members of the LGBTQ as well as toxic feminists who are trying to promote the taking of the vaccine because subconsciously they associate the vaccine with this junk science that America is trying to promote. That's why you see these Democratic politicians continuously talking about how they're going to follow the science. What they're really talking about is trying to get people to embrace humanism. I stated, I believe, in one of those shared posts on my main channel because someone asked about the vaccine and they claim to be reposting video of Bill Gates, which is footage that many people I'm sure have seen already, that alleges or purports to be Bill Gates in a meeting with the CIA, claiming to have a vaccine that will inhibit people's belief in the Most High or their affinity for a quote-unquote religion per se. And I stated in a response to that post that I do believe that this vaccine has a component of whatever it is that person who's speaking to the CIA, because that was not Bill Gates. I do believe that this vaccine has a component of that quote-unquote anti-God serum within it because they're just promoting it too hard and they're using it alongside of the catchphrase of we're going to follow the science. In other words, we're going to get you to remove yourself from any belief in the Most High through the science. And that would explain the correlation between the vaccine and the constant need to have the number 66 or 666 associated with it. Whether it be some of the bills that the Democrats have tried to draft up to submit to Congress, or the patent number associated with Bill Gates in an attempt to patent the vaccine, or any tracking mechanism associated with the vaccine on a global basis. It's very clear that in their minds, this is a manifestation of the quote-unquote mark of the beast of Revelation 13. So we're just getting started with this overall vaccine storyline or narrative. Eventually, I do believe that they're going to try to push to make it mandatory in some way, shape, or form. And there's a reason for that because, once again, they're trying to pull people away from the Most High in these last days. Starting from 2020, they're going full throttle into their forced worship of the quote-unquote divine hermaphrodite, also known as the Baphomet. So what role Charles Barkley has to play in this, who knows? But he is an advocate of the NBA players jumping to the front of the line. Are these his real thoughts, or was he prompted to say this because he knows that the NBA players are quote-unquote influencers, and once they've taken the vaccine, hopefully they can parlay that into getting other people, particularly people of color, to take it? Because I'm sure that most of you brothers have noticed that the media is constantly trying to accentuate so-called black people taking the vaccine because they know who we are according to scriptures. Once again, to me, that falls in line with my assertion that there's something in this vaccine that's meant to take us away from the Most High and our abilities to have faith and belief in the concept of God. But it's just my assertion right now, just my perspective.
So rather than me explaining, let's just watch what Charles Barkley said Thursday night, and I think it'll be pretty clear to you why he's in some trouble.
We need 300 million shots. Giving 1,000 to some NBA players. What about NFL? NFL, I'm just getting ready to say NFL players, hockey players. Listen, as much taxes as these players pay. Let me repeat that. As much taxes as these players pay, they deserve some preferential treatment. For life and death? Yes.
Kenny Smith, you need to stand in front of every hospital in America and tell them that there should not be preferential treatment based on life and death according to the income of the patient. And we all know that's not the case. But Kenny has a role to play on television. Charles Barkley, he stepped outside of the matrix for a second, or maybe he's still within it because he may have been prompted to say that the NBA players should have to take the vaccine first. Who knows? Either way, just in assessing his statement from a two-dimensional perspective, he was speaking according to reality. In other words, what he's saying is that the taxes that the NBA players pay is of such a greater amount than the average person. Of course, that's contributing to many of these government programs and protocols. That means that they should get preferential treatment. That's according to Charles Barkley.
Yeah, the amount of money you make. No, I said taxes. I didn't say the amount of money you make. Well, that's on taxes. I'm saying the amount of taxes these guys pay.
Kenny Smith has to play that fake Pollyanna role. Oh, no matter how much money you make, you should still get the same level of health care as everybody else. And we all know that that's not the case. That's not the case. Healthcare is a multi-billion-dollar industry, a multi-billion-dollar business, maybe even multi-trillion-dollar. Who the hell knows? Like every other business, and money talks.
We can't go there.
I love Kenny. The funny part is Kenny's like trying to save him. He's like, no, you don't mean that. Like he's kind of like, and he's like, no.
And Charles just didn't want to take the lifeline.
Because Chuck doesn't believe in that lifeline. Chuck believes that he's speaking the truth. And from a two-dimensional perspective, he is. Once again, my only question is whether or not Charles is sincere in this assertion and the reason why he's saying it. Or was he prompted to say it by someone else? Because they're trying to push this vaccine on people very hard.
And, this is the great debate, though, because I've seen this debate all over Twitter. Some people are like, no way, healthy athletes just get...
And they're also, of course, trying to use the so-called black woman because they've set her up as the figurehead of the so-called black community. They're trying to use her as a mascot for the vaccine as well. And of course, they buy into it like they buy into most other things. And when I say the so-called black woman, am I speaking about every so-called black woman? No. But for the most part, they're trying to use the so-called black woman, especially in healthcare, as the mascot for taking the vaccine. Because they've cast her as the head of the so-called black community. So they view her as the biggest influencer outside of entertainers.
The line, and then other people are like, well, look, we got the athletes out there acting like they're essential workers because they had to work during the pandemic. So I've seen both sides. I would say I want obviously the older generation and who needs it to get it first. That obviously.
Yeah, it starts to get a little uncomfortable when you're talking about people just because they have money.
Yeah.
And I know Charles kind of objected to when Kenny, we're going to give people a vaccine just because they have money. But you pay more. When you make more money, you pay more taxes. So there's obviously a correlation there. And that gets a little uncomfortable because the opposite of that is that people then who don't have money are not getting the top medical care. And that.
I have news for you. People who don't make a lot of money, they're not getting the top medical care. They're not eating the top foods. They're not receiving the chief or the top education. What's new? I don't understand why it's become such an anathema to speak plain truths. Oh, I know why it is. Because the men of this society, the males of this society have become so effeminized. And they bought into this class war between the quote-unquote rich and the quote-unquote poor, which are purely Marxist tactics, when the fact of the matter is that Marxism is based in envy and jealousy. It's based in someone who has no ambition, has no work ethic, trying to tell people who do that you owe them because you're living better in life than they're living. Now, in a free capitalistic system, I'm not talking about a monopolistic capitalistic system or a predatory capitalistic system, but in a free capitalistic system, it's about who has the best work ethic, who's the most intelligent, who's the most imaginative, and they can make their way up the ladder. That's why you'll find that people who started out poor but ended up doing well for themselves, they start to think in a different way because they grasp that a lot of the aspects of poverty are based in a thought process where people put ceilings over their own heads.
Is not something that should happen. I think if he wanted, and let me stress, Charles is completely wrong here in my opinion.
And let me say this very quickly. Are there certain inhibitions that are placed on so-called black people to stop us from being able to compete? Absolutely. But are there more avenues in this day and age to do well for yourself than ever in history? Absolutely. Than ever in history.
I think the better argument that he could have made was that the NBA right now is sort of in a COVID-19 nightmare. You're seeing so many games postponed. I think the better argument to be made was that a lot of jobs, hundreds, thousands of jobs, are dependent on the NBA players being able to play.
Right, but that was pretty much the point that he was making. When someone like a Charles Barkley states that with as much taxes as these players are paying, they deserve a little preferential treatment, that's the connotation along with that they're generating so much money that what's associated with them are people whose jobs are on the line in association with the NBA, the NFL, etc.
And that is important. So if you have to give up a couple hundred vaccines to the players so the league can go on, maybe that makes it worthwhile.
Yeah, that's definitely a better angle at it. And I think the other angle is a lot of people were talking about when the athletes didn't want to go to the bubble, right? I can remember people complaining like, what is wrong with the athletes? Why don't they just want to go? But then that's essentially being an essential worker in a sense of if you're going to move away from your family, friends, be disconnected in a bubble for 4 or 5 months. Everybody's like, yeah, but you're playing basketball. No, I'm gonna tell you right now, the players were miserable. I know people don't like
Oh, the fuck well. Nobody wants to hear that bullshit. There are coal miners and factory workers who are miserable too. Nobody gives a shit. There are short order cooks. There are delivery people who are miserable as well. Nobody gives a shit. Get over yourself.
hear this, but that's why they're uncomfortable with the conversation of bubble 2.0 because it was that.
And then on top of that, these entitled, fake, woke Marxist athletes, they want to make money like capitalists, but then bitch and complain as if they're the proletariat. That's why people are so angry and upset at many of these, especially these easily manipulated, puppeted athletes. Nobody gives a fuck about your opinion, especially since most of them have a mind that operates on a two-dimensional level and not on a three-dimensional level.
For the players, like it was that bad.
Yeah, so they don't want to go back to the bubble. They obviously want to play basketball, but still be with their families and their kids. Charles will get past this, but I think this is one of the few missteps for a guy who, again, like I said, is usually loved by everyone. Yeah.
Well, that's part of the problem. If you're loved by everyone, you're probably playing a character. You're not being the real you. Anyone who's super popular to the point where they're loved by everyone, they have to stay within that, within that role that inspires the cult of personality. That's why Michael Jordan got so frustrated later on in his career. And he said, if I could go back, I would not allow myself to be cast as a role model because now I can't be the person that I really want to be. But anyway, peace.